Hey everyone, welcome back to the Spiritual Underground. Or I hope you're coming back. And then again, I hope that this might be the first time you've landed on this podcast. I'll let you know a little bit about what you've stumbled upon. If you don't know, primarily my podcast, we're in this 8th season of it. I'm coming up on 400 episodes, someplace in that neighborhood. And it started out being 12-step recovery. That was my background. That's what changed. That was changed the trajectory of my life, heading from one way to going this direction. And you'll hear a lot of stuff that sounds like people at podiums of 12-step communities all over the world sharing their stories, sharing their experience, strength, and hope. But in the past year, 18 months, I don't really even know how long it's been. A lot of people have been knocking on the door, bringing new tools and asking to be on the podcast. And it really just warmed my heart. And I'm a yes to the universe. When the universe sends gifts, I'm not the one to tart no thank you. And it's interesting because I never have somebody asked to be. I can't think of maybe a couple different people who just didn't seem like a fit over all this stuff. It's hardly ever happens. Everybody's usually a fit. So welcome to the show. My name's Dan Reeves. I probably didn't say that. And like I said, my background's 12-step recovery, but it was like a springboard for me to open my heart and my mind to much other things. When I was under the influence, I only had very few things I could open my mind and heart to, and recovery has changed that. We got a cat in the picture. That's a funny thing. But let's keep going. My guest today is Jessica Dibb. We have her book here next to me, Breathwork and Psychotherapy. I've been reading through it. Clinical Applications for Healing and Transformation. How are you doing today, Jessica? Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Dan. I'm doing quite well, and I feel very simpatico with your service that you're doing for everybody in this podcast. So I'm excited to be with you.
Yeah, it's an odd thing to me how many times a cat appears on Zoom. It happens in 12-step meetings. It happens on my podcasts. It's interesting. I giggle about it every time one pops in. I had cats growing up, but I never have had them. Well, my wife was allergic to them real bad, so we never had any cats, and I don't have one today, but they keep on popping into my life, and I'm like, what's up with that? Got a bunch of neighborhood cats that like to hang out on my back deck.
Oh, that's lovely. That must be quite interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, they're skittish. They don't come to me, but they hang around. Uh so this is another one of these things, kind of like the cat jumping into my life. There's been quite a bit of breath work people coming into my life, and there's that old I think it was Carl Jung's deal on synchronicity and watching how like I keep on getting that message over and over, and so I have been paying attention to that message, and I have been doing some purposeful breath work for the past couple months, mostly at the education I've received from some of the people that have been on the podcast. So I'm dipping my toe in it, and I do understand it on a surface level, but your book really is I will just say for me, it's a high level look at what breath work really is. You want to talk about it a little bit from how it began, what brought it to being?
Yeah. You know, I think that you would understand this, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners do, from the 12-step perspective of turning our life over to a higher power, because I really feel like the book was a kind of a calling card from a higher power. I had made a decision. That my whole life I'd been looking for what I would consider, even as a child, I think I saw that everybody had love in them. Everyone wanted to be that love deep down. They might have fear that was holding them back. And I just felt I wanted to find the way to unlock that fear in my parents and other people, everybody really, so that this love and the gifts that everybody had could be shared with the world. And I was looking for a kind of universal key, because I felt like, there's all these different wonderful tools, and I practiced a lot of them and studied a lot of them. But what's the thing that would really like just bring us all together, and that it was available to everyone. And I had gone on a long journey through the arts and through ballet and the idea of bringing beauty to the world. And then I was going to go to medical school. I loved biology, I loved health, I loved medicine, I worked in hospitals. And a lot of that was that I wanted to get the degree to kind of validate, that I was starting to understand something about breathing. And, there came this moment before, right in my last year before I would have gone to medical school, where it just really hit me. Breathing is the universal medicine. I mean, even a person on a respirator can do conscious breathing. They might not be able to change the rate of their breathing, but they can bring awareness to their breathing, and that's going to create physiological change. And I just love that it was such a, equal opportunity employer, that it's the great equalizer more than even death. It's like we all want to be able to breathe. And I made a decision at that point not to go to medical school because I knew at that time, several decades ago, that it was still considered a little far out, a little weird. And it was maybe part of yoga, but I didn't even want it to be associated exactly with yoga because I really wanted it to be a universal medium that, regardless of your belief system, your spirituality or not, your culture, that you would just get that the most precious medicine and treasure that we have is right inside of our own chest. And so I made a decision not to go to medical school. I felt really sad about it, but I knew that I was going to be pushing the envelope at first about, hey, here's what you can do with breathing. Here's how you can help yourself with health, even to the point where some things get cured through breath work. You can have expanded spiritual experiences, psychological healing. And so I did that for many years. And when Norton Publishers contacted me one day and asked me if I would write this book about integrating, at the time, what they wanted me to do was write a book about integrating breath work into psychotherapy, still making sort of psychotherapy the thing. And I remember just feeling like this is a calling card from a higher power, because this is my degree. This is the thing that will, it wouldn't have been the book that I would have chosen to write exactly, but I realized it was a real opportunity. And as it evolved, they gave me really almost a decade. They said they never gave any author that long, but I really became committed to having a book that was evidence-based, so that, anybody who had that scientific, rational mind could completely get it, that it was poetically inspiring, that it was practical in terms of, here's simple things that anybody can do every day, that was expansive in terms of, hey, if you want to go deeper, in terms of like working, speaking of Jung, working with the shadow, working with your potential, you can do that. And also the spiritual, it's like both from the ancient perspective of understanding breath, but also just everybody's connection with a higher power, and philosophical as well. So I wanted it to have all of that, and the psychology to be grounded in psychodynamic theory. And so, it took a while to kind of put all that together and do all the study that I needed to do in order to match that with all the experience that I'd had with facilitating tens of thousands of people over the years. So that's how the book came into being. And at some point, they realized this isn't just a book about integrating breathwork into psychotherapy. It's about finding higher ground, about, like, Freud showed us what psychotherapy could be. Then Jung came along and re-envisioned it. And then we've had many other people that have brought new elements to it, attachment theory and Alice Miller and the Wounded Child and trauma. And now we have mindfulness even in, Dan Siegel and John Kabat-Zinn. And I knew that breath work could actually be a next level re-envisioning of how we could heal the psyche and soul. And so they realized that too. And so instead of it being breath work into psychotherapy, it became about, how do we take the best practices of all of this and actually envision a higher order kind of transformation and healing? And so that's how the book came about.
Yeah, well, I will say you hit the nail on the head with what you explained about, because I saw immediately my mind jumped to the still on the page 145 in it, where it's got practical exercises to do that are laid out in a plain and simple manner that anybody can read through and do. But also at the same time, you see a lot of the stuff where, like you said, the people who really want to get their analytics on and really think about this and see where it is. And so I could feel I felt that vibe as I've been working my way around the book. Uh,
And also, there's the part that's just inspiring for those people that have a larger vision about their own spiritual connection or even what humanity could be, because the book really starts and ends with the thread that we are all born wired to breathe, and we're also born wired to love. And that those, it's like breathing is the physiological connection that can bring us into presence to our true nature as love. And the fact that we're born wired to want to connect, love our parents, even if they can't love us back well, that is waiting for us every moment. And so the book really does also have an arc about that we could transform our species from kind of fear and personality to love and creativity. And so that's there too for those that like that.
Right. Yep. 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 I saw that as well, and maybe there's something in the book that I picked up, but that's the first thing when you come out of the womb, right? That's the first thing that happens. And it's what everybody wants you to do, and that's what you're focused on, is that breath, that first breath, and we can go a ways without food and we can go a ways without water, but you're not going to go very far at all without breathing. It's not going to take a minute. And my first, like some years ago, and of course, the 11th step talks about prayer and meditation, like you'd said some years, kind of, I know that, like that, putting stuff in the category of woo. This
Yeah.
is just, and that's where I was at when I arrived at. Anything that wasn't inside my current knowledge base and what I felt comfortable with was woo. But I stumbled into some guys that was doing meditation classes. And the first things that usually was expressed in them was talking about your breath,
Right.
to be conscious of that. That was the first, and I can think back, it didn't really make a lot of sense to me that, but I was just following their directions. I just wanted to stop doping and drinking. So if I don't know how this could help, but I was at a point of desperation where I was ready to do whatever. If they'd told me to, I don't know, stick bubble gum on the bottom of my shoe every day before I left work, or before I left the house, I'd have done that. But that breathing started coming into my life from that perspective. And then over the past few months, I've been able to like find that through some of the guests that I've been had on the show and talking to them and working with them a little bit, of actually feeling some actual self-regulation. And this is kind of new to me, this I'm just dipping my toes in the water here, but to actually get some, have some catalyst that'll set my blood pressure up. And I'm a pretty chill dude most of the time, but that stuff happens. Something happens. I got kids. I got, different things that happen and pop me. And I can feel that myself get excited, that my entire body tenses, my heart rate, it comes up. I can feel that my blood pressure. And I found myself that I can move to the side and take a minute, because I almost always have that opportunity. I'm never pinned down,
Right.
thankfully, and take a minute and work with some of these breathing exercises. And sometimes it doesn't really make any difference if I'm like, because that's the thing about meditation. It's probably similar here. We can kind of get hung up on, are we doing it right?
Hmm.
And although there are some definitive practices that are right, if you want to put that on there, I don't really like that, but you get my point.
Hmm.
But just being conscious of my breath and taking deep breaths in and deep breaths out, particular ways I like to breathe deeply in through my nose and out through my mouth,
Hmm.
and just be conscious of that. And after a minute, I can feel myself go, "Phew,"
Hmm.
and come back down to where now I'm okay to manage or to deal with this thing without that heightened emotional state that I had a minute ago.
Hmm. Exactly. Yeah, and we can talk about just the power of that ability to self-regulate so quickly. Um, First, let's go back just to one thing that, because you mentioned about the 12 step and the practice and you would do anything. I'm remembering that part of the development of 12 steps was that Bill had written to Carl Jung about, the problem of addiction. And one of the things that Carl Jung said was that it was a sickness of the soul. It was the desire was for spirit, but we went for spirits. We went for alcohol, but it was actually a desire for spirit, and that would be the remedy, would be the contact with a higher power. So the wonderful thing about breathing is that it's an immediate way to contact the present moment, where you're not living in your fears about the future or your regrets about the past, but you're having a physiological experience of what, we might call the holy now, where we're not projecting our fears and hopes and desires. We're actually just present to creation itself that's here right now. So I do think that I've worked with many recovering addicts and people that weren't recovering at first but started using breath work. And I think they all feel this thing of like, this is a way to nourish myself, to feel the fulfillment, the filling of my soul and the hole that I have inside of myself. And rather than thirsting for something outside of myself, I thirst now for this, and I can find it right there in my breath. The regulation part is amazing. I mean, think about it in the most extreme case. If we ever have an ecological disaster, or violence of some kind, we might not have medicines. We might even be cut off from water. We might not have any kind of health care or any kind of tools. We will always have our breathing. We will always have our breathing. So I think that if we could develop a breathing centered culture where we recognize the potency and power of breathing from the first breath to the last breath, and everybody had a kind of fluency that they got about breathing and learning how to use their breathing, I think that, that would be a medicine, because we know that every single breath, this is beyond dispute now, according to Jack Feldman at UCLA, who is pretty much considered the foremost scientist studying breathing today. He says it's beyond dispute that every single breath is psychophysiological. And what that means is that every breath is informed by our physiological state. It's affected by our physiological state at that moment and by our psychological state. And every breath has an impact on our physiological state and our emotional state. So you can create a state change in the body, in your emotions, throughout your brain with one conscious breath. You're starting to create state change. And like what you experience, for instance, with the breathing through your inhaling through your nose and exhaling through your mouth, that is a very tried and true method for stimulating and activating parasympathetic activity in the autonomic nervous system when we have sympathetic dominance. Now, sympathetic's about doing, action, moving, responding, emergency, and emergence, interestingly, which is growth, transformation. That's a kind of psychological and spiritual emergence. So that all requires a kind of doing. Parasympathetic is about, it's often described as rest and digest, but it's really about that part of us that's more just being with the moment as it is, going with the flow. We're not having to secrete tremendous amounts of cortisol to move through life. And ideally, what you want is a balance between the two. You don't want overly dominant parasympathetic, because then you're kind of lethargic. And you don't want overly dominant sympathetic, because then you're anxious and your blood pressure's going up. And what we have in our culture now today is that too many people really are in sympathetic dominance a lot of the time, because the stimulation, the digital information coming at us all the time, environmental noise and pollution and all of that, the proliferation of AI, all of that. And also just the fact that we can have access to understanding oh, in this country, there's a war, this violence, like we're just getting a lot of stimulation and a lot of it's fear-based. So many people are in sympathetic dominance. They have a lot of cortisol, they're over-adrenalized, and it's very useful to be able to breathe in a way that activates the parasympathetic so that you could begin to have that balance again to where, like, if there was an emergency right now, you and I could deal with the emergency easily, but as soon as it was over, we would just be able to, move into the more go with the flow kind of thing. And I think that's the promise ultimately for breath work is in the immediate, we can get a state change, like lower anxiety, lower cortisol, raise our energy level if we're, if we're fatigued, heat up the body, put ourselves to sleep, work with an emotion that's difficult, like anger or jealousy or fear, or develop the beautiful emotions more than they've been developed, like love and compassion. So those, you can create those state changes. Ultimately, what you're looking for is what I would call integrated presence, where you have your somatic energy and wisdom. You have your emotional energy and wisdom. You have your cognitive energy and wisdom and your spiritual energy and wisdom, all functioning together in one breath, which is not that hard to create, which creates global neural coherence in the brain. And you're present in the moment with greater resources than you've had in the past. And that is a really powerful place to be.
Yeah. Um, that's a mouthful. Uh, so when that first meditation and all that stuff, and in my meditation practice even today, and as I read through the book, it dawned on me that maybe the real power in my meditation is my sitting still and breathing consciously, not so much the meditation, because that's usually what my meditation, I don't do a lot of, I don't make a big production of it. I used to use guided meditations a lot. Today I just sit quietly for a few minutes, a couple times a day when needed, always the first thing in the morning, or in the first my morning ritual, if you would like to say, and sit quietly and concentrate on my breathing. And then one of my other guests also have to brought that into me. Why don't you? And he gave me some breath exercises to help me settle down at night and to be able to use that to come down. Because like you said, there's a lot going on. There's a lot that's being, and I don't know if this is exactly right, being asked of us humans today. Like you said, all this stimulus, all this world affairs, domestic affairs, all this crazy, there's a lot of crazy stuff out there. And I found myself a couple months ago, or in the past couple months, getting a little spun up in it, paying too much attention to it, and allowing myself to start. And I could feel kind of in that same thing. You said that soul sickness thing. And what was always my little line is like when I first came to recovery, they told me I was spiritually sick, and I thought they meant I wasn't going to church enough. And I wasn't, but that wasn't the deal. And I realized that like my very spirit, my very soul had become ill over various things. And it wasn't just really the alcohol. That was actually the solution for me. That
Mhm.
wasn't it. It wasn't that really that I was drinking too much. Yes, that looked like the problem. The problem was underlying stuff that I hadn't managed. And so at the same time, on a day-to-day basis, this breathing exercise seems to like be able to continue to work on and heal that, that internal being, that spirit that's in me, and like you had said earlier, it was like medicine that comes in and out of me. And then if you talk about most of this stuff, like anything is a practice. Almost everything's a practice, right? I could sit down and breathe for a minute and I could get some benefit for a minute here today. But the real thing is the long term, to be able
Yeah.
to put it into practice and to be able to actually change your very being over time with practices such as this. And it's kind of one of my things. And where I'm going with this is it's incredibly hard to sit. I find it incredibly hard to sit and do that and just make myself take the time. I'm gonna find something else to do. There's clothes in the washer that need to be in the dryer. There's dirty dishes. There's this needs this the floor needs to be vacuumed, and I can find almost anything to do other than sit and be still for a few minutes. And I'm one of these, there's another podcast out there that talks about this thing about productivity debt. I wake up in the morning thinking I'm already behind.
Mm-hmm.
And then now I'm better at it. And now I'm aware of it. I can consciously, like today, I'm not doing much. I've made that today. I'm just not doing much. Uh, but I'll wake up and I'll think all day long that I've got to work my rear end off and get as much done as I can possibly get done. And then when I lay down my head in bed, I realize that I'm still in deficit. I didn't get it all done.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
and it, and
And
it
you
becomes
never
a
go there
cycle,
yet.
and it goes into tomorrow. And the next thing you know, man, I'm just really just like a ping pong ball or a pinball bouncing around off of whatever stimulus grabs my attention at the moment. And I find it difficult to stop and go, and I make myself do it. I am getting better, and through practice and through things like that concrete evidence that, like, hey, this actually worked.
Mm-hmm.
This did work. Okay,
Well,
well, that works. Then okay, let's take your time to do it, Dan. Take your time in the day to do it.
well, that's beautiful, Dan. Here's an offering to you and to everybody that's listening. So every practice, because what you said about practice is critical. We practice something where we might practice scrolling on our phone, and it's not a very good thing to become a master in, but that the point is we're always practicing something. So choosing to practice what will actually benefit us is a big part of the spiritual journey. It's a big part of psychological development and well-being. Here's a really interesting thing about practice. Every practice that you can think about doing, let's say, playing an instrument, uh, meditating, doing yoga, writing and journaling, praying, where you're sitting and really praying, doing contemplative stuff, uh, dancing, spiritual dancing. I mean, you can just think of so many practices that you could do. All of them, there's going to be start the practice, do the practice, and then you have to end the practice, and then you try to integrate what you've experienced into your daily movement. Guess what is the only practice that doesn't have to stop? Breathe.
Breathing.
I mean, the implications of this are incredible. So here's the offering. And first of all, let me say, so the psychologist Csikszentmihalyi, who taught us about the state of flow, and we know a lot about flow now. We know there's an initial kind of, you got to push through that discipline to get going, to climb that mountain with the ice, or whatever you're going to do. That's like painting that picture, playing that music, that's going to put you in that state of flow. Then there's the state of flow where you have a lot of inner guidance, and then there has to be the letting go. Well, again, with breathing, that doesn't have to happen. You literally could live in a state, once you find that flow, of continuing to be aware of your breathing enough of the time that you're still connecting with that flow. And so I would just offer to everybody, if you could breathe consciously, because as you said, Dan, it's the awareness is the 50% of the breathing. Yes, we can change the rate, the ratio, the speed, whether we're doing it through our nose or mouth, and all of those things have impact and different benefits, and it's good to know about them. But 50% of the shift is just the fact that we're being conscious about our breathing. And so my offer to everybody is, if you could do conscious breathing, literally just 7 minutes a day, 7 minutes a day, you will start to feel the quality of your life change within days to a week. And what you'll notice is you can do that 7 minutes, and you can sit or lie, and then you can keep on breathing consciously as you go wash the dishes or do the laundry or whatever. But if you can't sit, if you're psyching yourself out because you feel you have to produce whatever, then start breathing consciously while you're doing the laundry. Start breathing consciously while you're, cleaning out your refrigerator or whatever you may be doing. Because what I found from years of experience with people is that 5 minutes will create a state change, but it doesn't usually last. 10 minutes sometimes seems too psychologically long for people. It's like 10 minutes and I have to do all this other stuff. 7 minutes seem to be the sweet spot where people had enough of a state change that it could continue. Okay. And a study just came across my desk literally a week ago, that they were studying meditation and found out that 7 minutes is when the peak state happens. So if people would just breathe consciously 7 minutes a day, whether they're doing it during activity or whether they're sitting still on a mat or in a chair or whatever, the quality of your life will be changing within a week. You will start to feel what psychologists would say you're going from state changes, which is, the shift, lowering anxiety, elevating mood, opening up to compassion, loving kindness, all these different things, lowering blood pressure. So you can have a state change, but you're looking for a trait change where your behavior actually starts to change over time. And if you do 7 minutes a day, after a week, you'll start to feel the trait changes. And after a month, really feel them. And 90 days, it's like golden. And you can do it while you're doing activity.
That's a really good point. Yeah. Because my head tells me I got to stop to do it. Now, I have found that just through the practices and just through this awareness and the people I've been working with and talking to, that I will catch myself like realizing that I'm like real short breathing. I'm just like, I'm not even hardly breathing sometimes, it's almost just like a, and I'm not really panting. I'm just not really breathing. And I bring my awareness to it and get some real air flowing in and out of me again for a minute and being conscious of what I'm doing. And it's becoming something that's habitual, for lack of a better term. It's becoming a habit to watch my breathing and to do that. And it's probably been, I don't know, 6 weeks or something that I've actually probably been like you said, consciously breathing. And my buddy that was on here a while back that really started off, his name is Tim Thomas from Australia. Um, he kind of, we had an app that helped me
Mhm.
use it in the morning and the evening
Yeah,
to start getting some direction. After a little bit, I didn't really want the app anymore. I kind of got the handle on what we were going after, and began to use it on my own, and it's kind of funny. It goes with some other things that, like, sometimes, you're not really going to forget to breathe because you're going to have to, right? If you starve
you're going to
yourself
be
from
breathing.
oxygen, you're going to breathe in a minute. But that forgetting to do it consciously sometimes, and like, you know, I don't know, it was a couple of nights ago where I went to bed and I woke up the next day and realized I didn't do my exercise last night, and I don't beat myself up over that. I'll just continue to try and get better at it and pick up and keep going. You can miss one. There's one great thing about this stuff, and it's the same thing with 12-step recovery. It does not require perfection.
It does not. It's amazing how just bringing consciousness, and let's talk a little bit for those that like this kind of thing of what is actually happening in the brain when you breathe consciously. So, first of all, at a biological level, our brain stem is automatically breathing us. We don't have to think about it. We can spend all our volitional energy on overeating, being mean to people, scrolling through a phone, or doing wonderful things, painting and swimming and whatever. But we don't have to take any of our volitional energy, and our brain stem is just breathing us. But that's only activating that small part of the brain at the bottom. Now, um, at a spiritual level, we're being breathed by the brain stem, the medulla, physiologically. At a spiritual level, we have to realize we're being breathed by whatever you want to call it, the divine, God, love, biochemistry, doesn't matter. Something's breathing us that's more intelligent. We couldn't have created that, right? It's really, really highly intelligent. So what happens is when you breathe consciously, You activate the neocortex because you're making a choice to breathe consciously. You're also going to activate the limbic brain, which is the emotional part of the brain in the middle there, because you're choosing to breathe consciously for a reason. There's some kind of value that you're wanting. Like in your case, you might notice I'm not breathing. I want to oxygenate my body. So you know it's valuable to do that, and that brings an emotion. So as soon as we take even one conscious breath, we are creating a state in which the neocortex, the limbic brain, and the brain stem, the medulla, are all functioning and activated together in a single action of breathing. And the
Mm.
implications of that for focus, for inner peace, for a sense of integration and harmony, and having our resources, being able to respond to things with more wisdom, with more presence, are just amazing. And on top of that, when we breathe consciously, we can become appreciative of the fact that we're being breathed by a power greater than ourselves, however we want to describe that. And that shifts things. That's actually different than even taking a deep breath, which is kind of us having an agenda to get better, which is good, it's great, but to realize that you're being breathed every moment, that you have been being breathed, that you're going to be being breathed, really invites you into a larger context about your life.
Yeah, I really like that. It's something there's a lot that's touched me in there, and but that thing about being breathed, I really like that part. It shifted my thought about it,
Mhm.
instead of, because like you said, then, and I don't know if it says here, but my mind, like, I'm going to take this breath, give it to me,
Exactly. Yep.
here, let me take, instead of relaxing into actually, okay, no, something is breathing me.
Exactly.
Allow that and be conscious of it and allow that to happen.
I'm
Uh,
so glad
I,
you got that part, Dan, because it really is a profound shift. I think I've said to people, I probably said as a breathwork teacher 10,000 times in my life, take a deep breath. And it's not that that's a bad thing,
yeah.
but I don't say it anymore. I actually invite people to become aware that they're being breathed and then allow yourself to be breathed deeper. And, there's a physiological piece of that too. I got a very touching letter from a woman in the UK recently whose daughter has incurred a cervical spinal fracture and is now quadriplegic. And she had heard that I've worked with people on respirators with breath work to some, seems like it's been helpful in many ways. One of the things that we understand is that most disease, even mental illness, has as a basis an organic lack of oxygenated tissue. Like you were saying, like sometimes I'm aware I'm just barely breathing. Well, when our tissues are not oxygenated well enough, that can be the basis for mental health dysregulation and also other kinds of tissue dysregulation in our body that can set off chain reaction. Well, this woman, who the mother who contacted me, who wants me to work with her daughter who's on the respirator, they're working in a respiratory program that understands that the oxygenation of tissue is very critical to her being able to get back as much functioning as she can.
Mm.
So I think that this is like when I said that breath work can actually be curative, I have seen people, it's not that we should have an expectation about, well, everybody who has asthma could heal their asthma because there's so many different factors. But I've seen people literally heal their asthma, get off of their inhalers. I've seen people heal back ailments through breath work because the oxygenation of the tissue is so critical at the physical level, and then at the mental and spiritual level, having this global neural coherence in one breath opens us up to this realization that we're being breathed and accesses our resources because we're not in flight, fight, freeze, faint, or fawn mode anymore.
Yeah. Another thing that hit me was talking about whether if you're doing this inside or outside.
Mhm.
And if I recall that, like there seems to be a improved benefit of doing it outdoors rather than indoors.
Mhm.
And I'm an outdoors kind of guy. And I recently spent the winter taking I own some forest, and in the state of Indiana was offering a forest management class. And so I thought, well, I've got some trees, I got some forest, maybe I should learn a little about this. So I went and I took the class. And they started talking about things about the exchange that we have with, like, trees, for instance, about that, they're putting off oxygen and taking in carbon dioxide. We're just the opposite. So we've got this symbiotic relationship with them. And then I started thinking about, like, how well I feel. And I'm conscious of that, to be able, when I go to the forest and I go to the woods or I go outdoors into fresh air, how that actually lifts me. And I don't think I'm alone in it, but I'm the only one that can feel that for me. And I hear other people speak of it. And this piece of me thought about that thing about, well, I'm in like a more cleaner, especially like in a forest of trees who are all expelling oxygen,
Mhm.
that when I'm out there in that, then when I'm breathing, I'm actually getting an extra dose of cleaner medicine than being in a stale house with the HVAC going, or the climate control and whatever other stuff is happening because they just painted a wall, or
Yeah.
the cleaning solutions are been, you just cleaned and you got that smell in the house and you think, oh, what a wonderful clean smell. But then you're like, yeah, but should I really be breathing that in? But that charge I get from being outdoors. And then I saw you talking about that. You said that breathing outdoors you would actually prefer, that's what you would recommend rather than doing your exercises indoors.
Yeah, it was a wonderful outcome of the pandemic, which is that, I wanted to take people outside so that in case anyone was sick, there was, not likely that they would get someone else sick. And I just discovered exactly what you're talking about, Dan, that have people actually had a greater sense of their well-being. It was emotional as well as physical. And I think they also felt connected. They felt a sense of belonging to the earth. I think some of us describe this now as the experience of realizing that there's only one breath, meaning that this is an oxygen planet and everything is participating in the oxygen cycle in some way. Photosynthesis, the waters, the earth has oxygen in it, the mushrooms, the trees, as you said, plants, animals, everything is participating in this oxygen cycle. So you can metaphorically think, when I'm inhaling, countless life forms are exhaling. And when I'm exhaling, countless life forms are inhaling.
Yeah.
Really can give you the sense of that there's just one breath and we're all a part of it. So I teach almost all my classes outside now, unless I'm online, because that nature transmission of that one breath is so powerful for people spiritually, emotionally, and physically.
Yeah. Yeah. I was sitting in that forest management class and having some of this breath stuff being introduced to me. And I know I'm thinking something completely different probably than everybody else in this class was when we were talking about that. I used to call the outdoors, I still do. It's my battery charger. It's my
Mhm.
soul's battery charger. It does something for me. I grew up beside my dad hunting and fishing. Uh, and I still love to do both. But today I mostly pretend to. And there's like that, like yesterday I went mushroom hunting. Uh,
Ah,
and and it's really just an excuse to get out and take a hike. And I don't know, there's something in Dan that, like, I just won't, I will at times, but like I like to have an excuse to hike. And one of them is hunting. I don't ever shoot anything anymore. I don't have a problem with it at all. I just don't. It's something come over me and it's just not anything I want to do. But I still look like a hunter and I'm still dressed in camouflage and I got my longbow with me and I'm out wandering around in the woods or sitting in a tree someplace or whatever. And that exchange works to help me. And if I don't get it, I get a little goofy. I can feel myself like I'm like, I need to get outside. I need to get out amongst the woods for a little bit, and I can listen to myself there and know that and take the time to do that. Another thing where I was exposed to this was through a yoga practice. I've been practicing yoga pretty seriously for about 10 years now. I'm in the studio 3, 4, 5 times a week. I was there this morning. And it's funny this morning, because it was, they call it hearts and hips.
Mm,
and we get in there, and I always try to arrive a little bit early, and I lay on my mat and I consciously breathe for a little bit.
mm.
I lay on my mat and just wait until class starts and consciously breathe. Just don't think about anything else. Just, and one piece of it is I found that it like oxygenates myself so that whenever the actual physical practice comes in, I'm like full of gas, you know.
Yep.
And the teacher come in and she sat down and she said, "Okay," and she said, "If you would, you know, get comfortable, seated position, however you want to. We're going to breathe for a few minutes." And she just coached us into breathing for a few minutes, and I don't watch the clock, but it was a substantial little piece. It was a 75-minute yoga class. It's a substantial little piece. And inside my mind is smiling because I'm getting this education from various angles. And I'll hear more of my favorite yoga teachers is starting out the practice that way. And it was a really good practice when I started out, there was something that hit me. And I don't know what they are. I talk to people and some people get them and some people don't, but I get a tingling sensation. It's very pleasurable.
Yep.
I want to hang on to it. You know, I
Hmm.
get it when I'm around certain people. I get it through touch at times. And sometimes it's for reasons I can't explain. I don't know what has happened. But today in the first few minutes of our physical practice, I had that coursing up and down through my body, and it's uh, so, you know, I've heard people say Kundalini tingles. I've heard people say ASMR.
Hmm.
I don't know what it really is,
No,
but
I like to call it a transmission of the life force. And I think that when we're around people who are saying yes to their essential nature, saying yes to their true self, they're letting the true life force, not their projection of the life force or their imagination or their defense of how they think they should be, but they're just literally letting the life force be. That will give you a tingle if you are moving the life force through your own breathing, right through your own body. That will give you a tingle. If you're in the presence of maybe, rushing water where all those beautiful, that life force, those ions, then that will happen. And I think that one thing that we know now about yoga from, I would say, the foremost yoga researcher in the world is Shirley Tellis. I feature her in the book in several places. She wrote a
Mhm.
little review. We're friends, and she's an amazing human being. Over 200 articles, that research studies that she's published about yoga and breathing. She's been studying the ancient texts. It turns out, Dan, that the heart of yoga was breathing. And I think that what happened, and I learned this too when I studied yoga and lived in India for a while, is that people would be doing their breathing practices and having these tingles and these, expanded states of consciousness and connecting with the being breathed. And they would have what we might call awakened states of consciousness, or we might call it a connection with a higher power. And their bodies would move into positions of gratitude, of opening, of, surrender with the head on the ground. And they weren't doing asanas, their bodies were being brought into yoga postures or asanas, but the center of the experience was the breathing and the psychological and spiritual shifts. Now, people came along and said, "Oh, look what that guy's doing, and I want to be like him, so I'm going to do that posture." And those things are very, very good for us, but it really turns out that the heart of yoga is breathing. That's what it always was.
And that is the focus of root of the practice that I do. And you talk about it, and I can't. My Southern Indiana hillbilly doesn't want to say certain words, and I can't. But the uwaji breathing,
Ujjayi, Ujjayi.
Ujjayi breathing. See, I told you, that's an anchor, or one of the foundational things, and we're constantly being coached to focus and breathe, and we'll get like accolades that the breathing is great, because you can hear. And I love that too, because that's one of the things that's the difference between like doing, yeah, I went through teacher training. I can do it over here on the living room floor if I want to.
Mhm.
Uh, and it was a great thing. It's a little story. It was 2019. For whatever reason, was in the studio, and the owner of the studio said, "You should take teacher training this fall." And of course, I was like, But ding, ding, ding. I said, okay, I'll do that. And I did it. And I did it more, less so to teach, but more to strengthen my personal practice.
Mhm.
And then COVID hit and all the studios closed down. And I had just finished strengthening my personal practice just in time. And that's an interesting thing about how the universe seems to work. If you're, I don't know any other way, I call it in alignment, my like true north. Things tend to go my way, and I don't really see it when I'm standing there looking at it. I only see it over the rearview mirror usually, and I could look back and see how that played out. Uh, but I love that group breath
Mhm.
in the studio when we're all in there working and doing what we're doing, and some of it is flat just for fitness, and that isn't, that's important to me. I'm aging, I want to keep healthy, I want a healthy body and healthy longevity, but I know there's a lot more to it than that, because instantly the first time that I ever got tricked into going to a yoga class, I walked out of there going, there's something else to this besides just that exercising. I like that part too, but there's something touching my soul in there that I'm was unable to get, understand. And I don't say I'd still do, but coming back to that, when that group of people are all breathing in and out and you can hear everybody, it's like a symphony kind of thing, and then that power, whatever happens there is, like you said, it looks like we're in there doing asanas, but there's more going on than that.
It's so powerful what you're saying, Dan, because I think breathing is the central unifying medicine and nutrient of the human species. Like I said, you could be on a respirator and you're breathing. We have these other senses, smell, touch, taste, sound, and all of that, and they are very powerful too. But that breathing is the unifying thing. However, sound is very powerful. And what I say in the book, which I think you've probably read, is that the most regulating sound for an individual is the sound of their own breathing, because their mirror neurons in their brain are hearing the call and response of their own physiology and
Mm.
emotions, and they're listening, and it helps align the body. In relationship, the most powerful sound, short of saying the words "I love you" in whatever language, which is also very regulating, but is hearing the sound of another person's breathing in tandem, in resonance with yours. That's its own kind of primal language that transcends culture, different languages, different experiences. And so, again, I think if we were evolving, which I think we are slowly actually, towards a more breathing centered human culture, we would find that our relationships would get more easier, our sense of internal regulation, because the sound of our own breathing would be so regulating, and the sound of someone who's in resonance with us breathing, like happens in your yoga class, would be very, very powerful for relationships. And you mentioned about COVID several times, and you talked about Carl Jung, and you talked about the fact that breath work seems to be proliferating. I think humanity went through in 2020 a kind of moving through the shadow of breathlessness, because we had these three shock waves. We had the fires in Australia, a billion animals died, people, then Europe, and then the United States. We learned all about how important it was for things to be able to breathe. COVID hit, and we were hanging on sometimes in the hospital, the nurse, the doctor, the loved one on the Zoom is just, please, one more breath, hang in there. We just became so aware of how important breathing, and
Mm.
had George Floyd saying, I can't breathe. And that's a statement that's probably been thought or said by millions of people throughout history who in some way had their right to breathe taken away from them. So it really affected the planet. And I think we had
Wow.
three shock waves of the shadow of breathing, which is breathlessness. And right in that year, the interest in breath work just proliferated. It went to a whole new level. So I think that we can continue and we could potentially get to this place where we so value the first to the last breath, and we teach our children about breathing, and we hear the sounds and the language and the transmissions, that we could potentially be so much more healthy and so much more relationally attuned to each other.
Yeah. And I like the intentional. I love that. I hadn't even thought about that, that like that's higher power or whatever you want, this transition period of making us aware, if you're paying attention, to how important breath is in some way that, again, this is rear view mirror kind of stuff, right? When you're in it, you can't see it.
Yeah.
I have to look behind me and go, oh, okay, well, maybe I do understand what was going on there. Another thing COVID did was brought this to light. It elevated this very quickly, where we can talk all over the world and share, and you can do breathing exercise classes and various things with people all over the world now. And we didn't do that before COVID. 12-step recovery, we had to move to Zoom.
Yeah.
All this happened, and at the time I hated it because I like being face to face with people. But looking back, I go, hey, that is super cool the way that came about. There was one other thing that caught. No, there's a lot of things, but the thing that caught my mind, and I almost thought you might be going there a second ago, was that you had talked about eye gazing and breathing in concert and
Yeah.
breathing and doing that.
Yeah.
And in yoga teacher training, we did eye gazing exercises. Very uncomfortable with a bunch of, like, I'm one of the only males in a female dominated
Yes.
class,
Yes.
and we're sitting for uncomfortably long time, uh gazing into somebody's eyes. And I've had the honor, the privilege, whatever. I've got that place in the country, and it dawned on me that I might be able to have like men's retreats for my 12-step men's community out there. And I've been doing that, did the past 10 years.
Mm.
I've had men's retreats out there where we get together for a weekend and we cook meat over the fire, and we have meetings and discuss things, and we have other exercises. I always ask people, I try to incorporate some people that are in my class or in my group to bring something to the group and present it and do a little exercise. I don't care what it is, man, as long as it's in alignment with what we're doing. Surprise me. If you want to run it by me, I'm cool with that too. But I brought that eye gazing thing into that men's circle.
Mhm.
And boy, you want to talk about something that really everybody talks about it every year. And I tell people that are come back over and over to just kind of keep a lid on that so that new people can have that experience too, uh, of sitting with somebody, another man, face to face. Now, I never thought about incorporating the breathing thing along with it.
Exactly. Yes, that will amplify it totally.
Uh, there's probably some of that happening organically,
There will be.
as you do that, because I feel that, because there is a state change that happens when, after, in whatever, maybe that's 7 minutes also, that changes, because it doesn't happen at first. You're kind of giggling and you hear them, and I see them, and they're smiling, and they can't, and they're glancing away or whatever, and then they settle down. And then you see these men, and I try to like pair them up, not because they want to like do it with their friend, right, their buddy, and I try to like separate
Yeah.
that, and get them with somebody that they're not as close to. And it always, the one of the other dynamics of it is like whoever they do that with, they end up like having a little special bond that they carry away with,
Yeah.
as a result of doing that. But then you see them all settle down, and that energy is awesome too, to be standing, because I'm usually kind of facilitating rather than participating. And although I do get to, sometimes it just matters if we're odd or even number of people and stuff like that. Uh, but to see them settle down and to watch these men and their faces drop, they're no longer smiling. They're pretty neutral, and they're just locked into one another, like that windows of the soul kind of thing with the eyes. And again, I'm like get touched to think about that. I get to like participate in that kind of thing and witness it. And it's just grabbing tools that other people have offered me. I'm always real clear about, this is not Dan. None of this stuff is me. This is because I've been open to receiving and exploring tools and what works here and what works there. And when I find something that I like, I usually will take it and put it. I always picture myself with a big toolbox here next to myself, next to my leg, next to my chair, when I find the tools that I think might be useful, for my service work and what I'm here to do. I don't know. I'm sure you feel the same way. I'm
Yeah.
pretty convinced I'm here to help people, and that's my main mission.
Yeah.
And whatever, however that plays out. So
Yeah.
that eye gazing thing and the breathing really, again, bells went off, ding, 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 when I read through that portion.
Well, you're bringing up a couple of things for me. So first of all, Dan, those men's retreats sound awesome, and really that's a great service that you're doing for men to give them such a sacred and safe space to really feel the depths of themselves. So a couple of things that are coming to me are you were talking about that toolbox, and you mentioned about that one chapter in the book where it's so practical, like everything's laid out of how to do these breathing practices, why to do them, what benefit you would be getting. I think that's chapter 7, and it's a toolkit of 11 breathing practices that people can do every day. And if they do the minimal amount every day, it's a 35-minute total practice if you want to do more than just the regular 7 minutes of conscious breathing. So that's a little offering I can make to people, is that chapter 7 in the book is kind of invaluable for a toolkit.
I've
Um,
got to post it. I got to post it on that
there you go. There you
chapter.
go. Because it helps you with, spiritual integration, with lowering anxiety, with focus, with sleeping, with healing respiratory stuff. It's like a little toolkit. And the other thing that I was thinking was that if we're gonna, when you do eye gazing with the breathing, it does amplify the experience tremendously. So for those people that might be wanting to try it on their own, or you as a facilitator, the one thing you want to do is after people have been breathing together with the eye gazing, you want them to close their eyes and just feel whatever they're feeling in their own body, so they don't only associate that level of love with that person, that they can feel that it's also just in themselves and in their own breath. That's an important way of integrating it to be with them all the time. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Yeah. It's interesting that, I mean, that as in the position I'm in, lots of people tend to look at you like you're an authority at things, which, and they will, I come and ask, hey, I've got this, what I do about my anxiety, what I do about, and I guess, uh, source energy provides, and I've been getting this toolbox that it seems like that keeps on coming back to like the answers to most of these questions about people wanting to, ultimately it's a self-regulation at some level or another. They want to know what do you have any tricks to help me with that? And now and the ones that are in this book, I'm really interested in. I haven't actually started doing it myself, but I'm committing myself and making a commitment here that to start having increasing that conscious breathing practice. 35 minutes sounds like a lot, right?
Yeah, but
uh
you could just pick two practices and do 10 minutes. I mean, if you do 7 minutes a day of conscious breathing, that's going to change your life.
Yeah. And
You,
the 7 minutes is a continuous 7 minutes. The
yeah,
35 is not necessarily
right,
comes 35. If you could do
right,
some in the morning, you do some while
right,
you're on your lunch break, you do some when you get home from work, you
absolutely.
can spin it out. And some of them are more for like getting up in the morning, and some of them are for more like relaxing when you're ready to settle down at night.
Right, and some of them are for if you're having a particular situation, like you're suddenly feeling anxious in the middle of the day, then you can use this one technique then. Yeah.
Yeah. Cause I'm in my regular job as an engineer. I just do that part time, but it's a demanding job.
Wow.
And I'll find myself getting too many balls in the air. Usually that's what it does for me, is I've got too many things going on, and I find that I'm not like, okay, Dan, consciously do one thing. Let's pick what's one needs to be done first. Let's consciously work on that task. All the rest of that just has to get shoved to the side. And I'm finding that when I make that transitional movement, what comes with me is a moment of sitting and breathing
Yep.
to make that transition to go, okay, everything else goes to the side. Let's take a moment, settle down, take some deep breaths, sit still for a minute, focus on my breath for a few minutes, and then I can go back at the task that I had chosen. And I'm finding that to be a really great tool at work on a regular basis.
Right, because what you're creating in that moment, again, is what I would call global neural coherence, where your neocortex, your limbic brain, and your brainstem are all working in harmony on the same task. And what that does is it allows you to see a bigger picture. You don't get caught by an emotion or a worry or an expectation that you have. You just can see the whole picture, and it allows you to make a shift the way you do. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. The flow state book, and that's been a piece of my learning over the past decade and a half or so too. And I find myself, I'm like in that state on a regular basis at work. I come to work, and the day disappears, and I've got a lot of stuff done. I'm almost don't want to leave, but it's time to go. Uh, and and uh, and I walk out like on my tippy toes when I'm leaving work, rather than what I see a lot of my uh, coworkers are walking out of the workplace looking exhausted,
Exhausted. Yeah.
like they are done. They're probably can't do another thing, and I'm floating out of work.
Yep, you're in a flow state. That's beautiful.
Yeah. Well, we're
And
coming up on an hour.
and the breathing will help people experience that flow state, as I said, just longer and longer periods of time because it doesn't have to end. You don't have to stop the practice. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would just challenge people to like really just say to yourself, okay, well, when I wash the dishes at night or in the morning, I'll set the timer for 7 minutes and I'll just make sure I'm breathing the whole consciously the whole time that I'm doing the dishes or folding the laundry or sweeping the floor or whatever it is. And that's a way to begin if you have trouble actually sitting yourself down to do it.
Yeah. Because those things don't really take mental energy either. You can sweep the floor and focus on your breathing at the same time, where
Yep.
it might be a little tougher in certain situations, but those day-to-day tasks that we do in the shower. Uh,
Yes. Yes. Beautiful.
yeah. Well, cool. How do we find the book? I know one of them showed up on my doorstep.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, the publisher sent you one, which I was very happy. I asked them to do that. But for your listeners, yeah, you can find it on Amazon. You can find it on Barnes and Noble. I can give you for this podcast, if you want, Dan, a little coupon code that if they want to order it directly from the publisher, it'll give them 20% off. Yeah.
Okay. That'd be awesome. That'd be
Okay.
really cool. Yeah. Uh, Thank you so much. You've elevated my breath work education and journey here. Uh, a lot more than I can even state. It's really looking through the book and reading it, and like I said, I jumped around, but I am like wanting to like it's caught my attention enough that now I want to read the whole thing, and I wanted to make sure I had enough of it to come in here and be intelligent about it. I really appreciate the work you're doing, and I think this stuff I really do. Just as you said, I believe that, and I say this over and over again, in the places, like I said, I got wound up. I'm looking into, if I keep my focus in these certain areas, it actually sickens my spirit. It does. I feel it. And I know that that's not good for me. And I need to, there's a funny balance. You talked about balance, a balance between like knowing what's going on to some level and then also being detached from it.
Mhm.
And if you keep your focus over there, the world can look like a pretty dark place. But I keep on meeting people like you who are bringing light to this world, and I am still convinced that the light's going to overcome the darkness. And
Oh,
and I see through people like you who are shining their lights and bringing tools to people, because that's really, I think, what we're really lacking to a great extent is tools to be able to manage this new modern life that we found ourselves in. And I don't know if there's a more powerful one than this breathing thing. And at the same time, it's very, very simple.
yes. And we all have
Uh,
access to it.
yeah, you're already doing it, and to elevate that, and I think it's world changing kind of data that we're coming like that you're presenting here.
Well, it's really been a joy and an honor and a privilege. And I also just want to say that I agree with you. I think that humanity has lived through some very dark times. There may be dark times now, but all it always takes is for some people to generate the light in a way, to generate a spirit of that we can we can elevate ourselves. And I think that can happen now. And I want to thank you for your part in that,
Yeah.
because clearly this podcast is a labor of love on your part. You want to share with people how they can elevate themselves and contribute and feel healthy and well at every level of their being. So it's just been a joy to have this conversation with you. It's been more almost like we took a little journey together, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. That is my goal here, is to have these kinds of conversations where we're both, I get high doing this. This
Mhm.
is my drug today. It raises my frequency, and yeah, it's just, it's another one of those things that came into my life that I don't understand. And maybe one day I'll look in the rearview mirror and understand it better. But for now, I'm just having fun doing it.
Mm. Well, blessings on it. Really
Oh,
beautiful.
all right. Well, one a couple things I typically say. I'd just like to thank everybody. I think we're all in some level of recovery, and whether from something, very few of us get to skate through this life unharmed at some level. And so we're all recovering from something. And I'd just like to thank everybody out there for allowing Jessica and I to participate in our recoveries and your recovery too, today through the medium of this podcast. And and I also like to think, if this may not be exactly true, but I think life is meant to be enjoyed. And if you're not enjoying it, I would in, I would just implore you to find tools like these ones we're talking about today, and try different things and include them into your life, because I want you to be enjoying this trip on this. As far as I know, I get this one trip on this big blue marble, and I want to, at the end of it, look back and go, hey, that was fun.
Mhm.
So have a great one, and we will end it here. Thank you so much, Jessica.
Thank you, Dan. Blessings to everyone.